She had done everything right. She returned the gifts. She blocked him on social media. She went to the police, weeks in advance, told them a man was threatening her, described the specific messages, and asked for help. On May the 21st, 2016, she was stabbed 61 times outside a concert venue in Tokyo. She survived, barely. And the injuries she carries, a decade later, are permanent. Near-blindness in one eye, facial paralysis, PTSD that has never fully lifted, a lawsuit that took 9 years to settle. This is the story of Mayu Tomita. And it is a story about what happens when a young woman does everything the system tells her to do, and the system fails her anyway. Mayu Tomita was 20 years old in the spring of 2016, an aspiring idol singer working her way up Japan's small venue music circuit. She wasn't famous in any national sense. She was at the stage of her career where she was building a following, show by show, performing for a few hundred people at a time. She had social media accounts, as all aspiring idols do. She had fans, some of whom sent her letters and gifts through her management's publicly listed fan mail address. On May 21, 2016, she had a concert scheduled at Event Space Solid in Koganei, a city on the western edge of Tokyo. She arrived at the venue. She never went on stage. Tomohiro Iwasaki, a 27-year-old man who had been fixating on her for months, was waiting outside when she arrived. He confronted her, and then he stabbed her. 61 times, with a pocket knife measuring 8.2 centimeters, screaming as he drove the blade into her chest and neck. Eyewitnesses at the scene heard him shout repeatedly as he attacked. Tomita went into cardiac arrest at the scene. She was taken by ambulance, rushed into surgery, and placed in a medically induced coma. She remained unconscious for 2 weeks. When she woke up, the damage became clear. She had lost most of the vision in her left eye. She had facial paralysis. Her ability to eat and breathe had been permanently affected by the injuries. She was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Tomohiro Iwasaki was arrested at the scene. He made no attempt to flee. He was found with the knife still on him. He was charged with attempted murder, stalking, and making criminal threats. In February 2017, a Tokyo district court sentenced him to 14 years and 6 months in prison. He pleaded guilty. Prosecutors had asked for 17 years. The court gave somewhat less. He was convicted on all counts. The attack was the end of a chain that had been building for months. And where that chain began was in an industry practice so normalized that almost nobody questioned it at the time. Like many idol management agencies, Tomita's team maintained a publicly listed postal address where fans could send letters and gifts. This is standard practice in Japan's idol industry. Fan mail systems create a sense of intimacy. The idea that an idol actually receives your letters, reads them, appreciates them. It's part of what the industry sells. Physical fan mail has been a feature of idol culture for decades. Tomohiro Iwasaki used that address. In January and February of 2016, he sent Tomita books and a watch. Tomita returned the watch in April. That was a reasonable thing to do. He was a stranger. She didn't know him. She sent the gift back. What happened next tells you where the real danger was concentrated. Within days of receiving the returned watch, Iwasaki posted more than 400 messages on Tomita's Twitter account. Reports indicate that in his prior communications, before the escalation, he had sent something that amounted to a marriage proposal, a declaration of a relationship, a claim on her. The returned watch was, in the only language available to her, her answer. It said, "No, there is no relationship." His response was immediate and hostile. The messages were threatening. There were, according to reports, specific death threats among them. Tomita blocked him on Twitter and went to the police. This was still April 2016, weeks before the attack. She reported the harassment. She told them about the volume of threatening messages, the specific nature of the threats, the escalation after she returned his gift. She asked for protection. The police told her she was not in immediate danger. Part of this response was grounded in a genuine legal constraint. Japan's anti-stalking law, passed in 2000 following the Okagawa murder case, was written to address a specific kind of conduct. Physical proximity, physical pursuit, waiting outside someone's home, following them in the street, that kind of behavior. Threatening messages sent via social media were not, under the law as it was written, legally classified as stalking. When Tomita went to the police in April 2016, what Iwasaki was doing existed in a zone the law didn't cover. Legal constraints and institutional failures, however, are not mutually exclusive. And in this case, they coexisted. On the morning of May 21st, the day of the attack, Tomita called police again. She was frightened. According to reports, an officer was dispatched in response to her call. The officer was sent to her home address. She was already on her way to the concert venue in Koganei. The officer went one direction, she went another. Iwasaki was at the venue. He had come prepared, he had a knife. He had been posting on social media about his anger toward her. And when she arrived, he was there. Why does someone respond to a returned gift with 400 threats and then travel to a stranger's concert venue prepared to kill her? The honest answer begins with the structure of the idol industry and what it trains certain fans to feel. Japan's idol culture is, at its core, a proximity business. What it sells is not just music or performance. It's the feeling of being close to a person, of having a relationship with someone who notices you, who responds to your letters, who might wave at you across a crowd. Handshake events sell seconds of face-to-face contact. Fan mail systems sell the idea that your message reaches her directly and matters to her. Merchandise creates a sense of ownership and connection. It's a carefully manufactured intimacy, and it works extraordinarily well, which is precisely why the industry keeps using it. For the vast majority of fans, this experience stays within the bounds of ordinary admiration. They know, on some level, that the relationship is asymmetric, that the idol doesn't think about them specifically, that the smiles are for everyone, that the letter is received by management and perhaps summarized. They know this, and they enjoy the product anyway. For a small number of fans, the manufactured closeness becomes something different. It becomes, in their minds, an actual relationship. A mutual one, something real that exists in both directions. It is said that Iwasaki had come to believe something like this about his relationship with Tomita. His gifts weren't random expressions of fan enthusiasm, they were, in his understanding, tokens of a bond. His messages weren't fan mail. They were communications within a relationship he considered real. When she returned the watch, she wasn't declining an unwanted gift from a stranger. She was, in his framing, rejecting him, withdrawing from something that was his. The 400 threatening messages, the death threats, the violence, these were the response of someone who believed he had been wronged by someone close to him, not by a stranger who'd simply decided not to accept an anonymous gift. This isn't an excuse. It's an explanation of the mechanism, one that appears with uncomfortable consistency in cases like this one. This is not a clinical diagnosis, and nothing here should be taken as one, but the behavioral pattern in this case is well enough documented in the research literature that it's worth examining carefully, because it comes up repeatedly in idol-related violence and in stalking cases more broadly. Researchers describe what Iwasaki exhibited as fixated pursuit, or sometimes obsessive relational intrusion. The core feature is a perceived relationship that exists entirely within the pursuer's internal world, but which feels to him as real and as binding as any relationship he has ever been in. The target isn't experienced as a stranger, but as someone who is already part of his life, who owes him something, who is connected to him, who has obligations to him. What makes this pattern particularly dangerous in idol contexts is the way the industry's own infrastructure supports the illusion. Fan mail addresses say, "She receives your letters." Handshake events say, "She will meet your eyes for 10 seconds and speak to you." Social media followings say, "She is aware of the fans around her." All of these are true, in limited ways, but a certain kind of mind reads them as confirmation of something they already believe. That the relationship is mutual, that it runs in both directions, that she is, in some meaningful sense, his. Rejection, in this framework, doesn't land as "she doesn't know me." It lands as "she is taking something from me that was mine." That's why rejection so often escalates these situations instead of ending them. The violence isn't punishing a stranger for failing to reciprocate. It's, in the attacker's distorted logic, a response to betrayal. What the Tomita case illustrates with terrible clarity is the role institutions play in that gap between someone reaching a dangerous point and someone being harmed. The police were responding, in part, to a law that hadn't been written to cover what was happening to her. But the gap between legal technicality and real danger was visible. She had received hundreds of threatening messages. She was frightened. She had come to them twice. The system she turned to measured her situation against a narrow legal definition. It was not enough. Japan moved, at least on paper. In December 2016, 7 months after the attack, the anti-stalking statute was amended, repeatedly sending messages via social media, repeatedly posting hostile comments on someone's account. These were now, formally, stalking. Prosecutors were newly empowered to file charges without requiring the victim to submit a complaint. A recognition that intimidated people sometimes cannot bring themselves to go to the authorities. The maximum prison term for online stalking was doubled. The case that prompted these changes was listed in official documents as the Koganei stalker attempted murder case. Mayu Tomita spent years recovering and years pursuing accountability. In 2019, she filed a civil lawsuit seeking 76 million yen, approximately $700,000 at the time, in damages from 3 parties: the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, her former management agency, and Iwasaki himself. She wanted the city to be held responsible for what its police department had failed to do when she came to them in April 2016 and described what was happening. The lawsuit against the Tokyo Metropolitan Government was settled in July 2025, 9 years after she was stabbed on a sidewalk in Koganei. 6 years after she filed. The settlement amount was not disclosed publicly. Around the same time, she shared a memoir with Kyodo News. She described her life after the attack as bitter and agonizing. She wrote about the PTSD, the permanent vision loss, the facial paralysis, the ongoing difficulties the injuries have created in her daily life. She wrote about what it was like to go through the civil legal process, to watch a city government that, in her account, had no intention of acknowledging fault from the beginning, move slowly toward an undisclosed settlement that resolved nothing publicly. She wrote that she regrets trusting the police. That line has stayed with people who followed this case because it isn't self-pity and it isn't bitterness in the ordinary sense. It's an accurate statement about what happened. She did everything right. She reported early. She returned the gifts. She blocked him. She called again on the morning of the attack. The system told her each time that it was handling it. It was not. She is in her late 20s now. She lives with permanent injuries. The man who stabbed her is in prison with a release date that will come in the next few years. Japan's anti-stalking law covers online harassment now. The law that failed her no longer exists in quite the same form. As she herself has noted, the number of stalking reports in Japan has continued to rise every year since the amendment passed. The law changes after someone pays for the gap. And then, usually, the gap moves. If this episode raised questions about this case, or about the systems meant to protect people from this kind of violence, I hope it gave you some of what you were looking for. If you want to make sure these stories keep getting told with the care they deserve, a subscribe, a comment, sharing this with one person who should hear it, that makes a real difference. Thank you for watching.